אוקיי, מאזינים יקרים, אז היום אירחתי את סיימון גרטסלר. סיימון הוא עשה 2 אקזיטים, היה מספר פעמים VP of Sales בחברות שנמכרו והגיעו לעשרות מיליוני דולרים בסיילס. דיברנו על איך להשיג דיזיין פרטנרים לסטארט-אפ שלכם, איך לייצר חיבור עמוק יותר עם לקוחות באמצעות מה שנקרא טריקים פסיכולוגיים, איך לדבר על קוונטיפיקציה, על כאבים עם לקוחות, מה הגישה הנכונה לגייס איש מכירות ומתי. כל זה בפרק שהוא כולו על חיבור אמיתי ואותנטי עם הלקוחות שלכם. היה פרק מעולה, ממש ממליץ להאזין. So just to maybe bring up how I got to know you, right?
Sure.
When I started as an SDR and I was, I came from selling cosmetics in the States.
Yeah.
To selling freaking, cybersecurity to Fortune 500 companies, calling Morgan Stanley, Bank of Montreal, SVPs. And I was like, who am I to do this, right? I had this kind of imposter syndrome in me. So I was looking for folks who know what they were doing, as I was always on LinkedIn. And you were one of the top voices I was actually listening to because you gave all kinds of tips.
Yeah.
Very genuinely. I told you this when I reached out to you, right?
Yeah.
So maybe you could, Simon, share how you got to where you were at that point. I mean, you've done 2 tech exits, a couple of times VP of Sales, led go to market with crazy complexity. I'm just curious to understand, how does a person get to where you are right now?
Sure, no, great question to start with, Ben. So mine wasn't a simple journey. I think a lot of people in sales, it's not necessarily straightforward. I actually started, believe it or not, as a tax accountant at a big accountancy firm in the city of London. Didn't really enjoy it, but actually that led me to break into sales because at one point they gave me like a side project, which was to call US companies with a UK subsidiary, and they were doing a big conference with tax implications for those 2 territories. So they literally, this is back in the mid-1990s, they threw a telephone directory at me. I had to research and then start cold calling and get people into a room for this conference. It was like a 2-week project. Until then, I'd just been going through the motions. I wasn't enjoying my job. And I really liked this. I had like a target of how many people to get in. I came up with my own scripts. I had to answer objections. I had to, keep going when you could go 2 or 3 hours with no one answering the phone. And pretty much got to the target, really enjoyed it. And then they said, thanks a lot, back to your tax accounting. And I said, no, I'm not going back to tax accounting. And I made a snap decision there and then to quit on the spot. So I gave up my job that very same day. I had a taste of sales, didn't know what I was going to do within sales, but I knew I didn't want to be a tax accountant. Yeah. So my first couple of roles were really teeing me up to do what I do now. They were very much direct selling. The first one was a jewelry company selling jewels like door to door to the big suppliers on the high street who had their range of supplies. So that was 2 years of going in the rain and carrying like heavy stock, getting held up at gunpoint in Paris wasn't part of the script there, but it was really like character building. And then I then switched to a company which I think even to this day, 26 years on, a lot of the sales tips I use and pass on are from this company. And it was a direct company selling suits to very busy, sort of, I suppose, like wealthy executives in their offices who wanted to look a certain way, didn't necessarily want to go to the Savile Row, the London suit suppliers at the time, right. And just going door to door within sort of Credit Suisse or Morgan Stanley, Citibank, the big law firms. And all the objection handling, all the things like that, a lot of that comes back to those very days. And then in 2000, I got into the whole tech boom, I suppose, that everyone was talking about tech. No one really knew what it was and how to manipulate it properly. And that was my first startup in the legal technology space. Right.
Crazy story. So you started as the complete opposite of sales, right? Like a tax accountant.
Yes, yeah.
It's a very cold kind of role.
Yeah.
And then you're saying that you loved to cold call.
Yeah, I did.
You love the object, which is counterintuitive, right? People think about cold calling, they go nuts. Like speaking to strangers, calling them out of the blue. What did you like about it?
I like the challenge. I like the challenge because it wasn't easy, obviously. I like the tenacity. I'd been, playing sport, etc. And I was whether it was tennis or football, I was very determined in the sporting arena, and it was like against the odds. So I quite enjoyed, being up against the odds or running marathons I was doing at the time as well. So I like that sort of challenging myself, if you like. And I like the fact that through your own personality, through your own persuasion skills, through the way you were speaking, you could change someone's opinion. You could actually frame a conversation. So until then, I'd done a bit of selling, I suppose, that was unofficial selling. So I'd sold ice creams in the park when I was 16, 17, etc. I just went to the local supermarket, stocked up on the items, and went sunbather to sunbather trying to sell them cold drinks and ice creams, etc. So and I'd also done trunk sales, like car boot sales in the UK, where you took all the household junk, the most random things, and had to try and sell it, like a lava lamp, like I can see behind you, for example. That could be $10 at a car boot sale, just anything like that. So even though I was doing it more as out of boredom and trying to do something a bit different, it prepared the grounding for everything I do now as well.
Right, you had passion for it. You couldn't explain it back in the day, but you love the characteristics of speaking to people, the challenge that's in it, the uncertainty, the fact that you control the outcome, like that. If you improve today, you could literally see the results tomorrow. I think that's one of the things that there is in sales, is the fact that you don't study theory for 4 years. What you study yesterday, you can apply to today's calls and already see you improving. Right. So you said you kind of done quote unquote enterprise sales. Selling suits.
Although it was B2C classically, because I was selling to one person out of their own wallet effectively. But that was all about referrals and navigating a company. And I would almost be in a meeting room all day and just people visiting me one by one, because it was very easy to. They had a new suit and they were showing it off to their colleagues on the trading floor. So that was how I built the business.
So you were saying that experience of you selling suits to busy, businessmen that wanted to look a certain way, you're saying that you took, tactics or skills from that experience and brought it into technology sales.
For sure. I mean, I'll give you an example, Ben. So, for example, mirroring, it's quite a classic, well-known sales technique. I was dealing with very busy executives who get to the point quickly. If I started really like going around the houses to present the product, the service, etc., I would lose them straight away. Some of them were already thinking about the next trade they were doing on the foreign exchange floor. So I had to mirror that energy. I had to mirror that pace. Sometimes I got more analytical people, like I'd served like a lot of lawyers, like very busy top lawyers in the city of London. And they were different. So I had to then get across objections and show them almost like more data, and that they were different personality to a trader who has to make a split-second decision. So already, without knowing that was mirroring, I was naturally doing it, because I knew that if I got to the point too quickly with a lawyer, I'd lose them. And the other way around, if I was really going into chronic detail about the suit and the fabric and how it wears in the winter, their eyes would be glazing over, and I wouldn't get a sell at the end of the day.
Right. There is this. You remind me of the book Surrounded by Idiots.
Yeah.
You read that one?
Yeah, I've read that book. Yeah.
Exactly. So it speaks about people in different colors, like that the busy executive sounds like the red type.
Yeah, exactly.
That you have to get to the point very quickly. Is more results oriented. Then you got the blue one, who's more analytical, and you have to kind of walk him through the features and the whole story.
Yeah.
Right. So you said you adapted yourself to those different buyer personas.
Yeah.
And that's also applicable for any kind of sale, especially when you're selling technology.
Yeah. Like for example, we had like some sort of pitch that we rehearsed. It wasn't like a Zoom type pitch, but we had like a pitch to talk about the company, etc. I could see straight away if someone just didn't want to hear it. And then in that case, it's go straight to the fabrics, and that's what they're there for. So you have to know your audience. So whilst in sales, it's good to have some sort of a script and know roughly the pattern of the call, you've got to better shelve it in 3 seconds if necessary and go down a different direction. So the best salespeople that I've worked with are people that can think on their feet. They're not just copy pasting every experience every time.
Exactly. So if we try to bring it down into the ground on, like for let's say discovery calls or demo calls, how is that strategy applicable to these scenarios?
So I think with discovery, I mean, you've got to get into character a bit when you're selling. So I always say, think of yourself as a detective when it comes to selling. You're almost there with your notepad. You're the detective on the case. You're looking for clues. You're looking for the way they say something or what they don't say, and that's going to help you as a detective to piece it together. So when it comes to discovery, the way I train the sales teams I work with is to just let them open the door to selling to you. And the way you do that is by asking smart questions, letting them speak, listening. So the classic way to do it would be you start off a bit broader. So you ask them a more generic question: what brought you to the call to this today? What are some of the issues that you're grappling with in the company? And then based on that, you start to get more and more specific and dig into the ones that could actually unlock a match on your product.
Right. So you're saying if I ask like a broader type of question, I could pay attention to their, I don't know, problem language.
Yeah.
The things that I could then drill into and uncover, business pain, not only process pain, right? I'm just curious about that adaptability, because you spoke about different buyer personas and you adapting your demo to those buyer personas.
Yeah.
So is this something that's also applicable in like technology sales calls? And if so, how? Right?
Very, very much so. So, and sometimes it's harder if it's like an enterprise where you've got 4 or 5 different characters. But part of what you're doing, whether either face-to-face or over a Zoom, is to be able to very quickly know, like similar to, Surrounded by Idiots, where you're placing people almost in categories and being able to sell to that category. So, for example, if I'm selling to someone who's like a finance person, they're going to be very interested in data and stats and bar charts and graphs, etc. If for that very same person I said, hey Ben, I'm going to play you a 60-second video of how snazzy our product is, irrelevant. That I'm going to lose that buyer. The other way around, if I'm selling to someone who's more commercial and maybe even from a marketing background, and I'm giving them stat after stat and graph after graph, I'm going to lose them as well, because that's not how they digest and process information. So you've got to be able to match and mirror that, knowing the personality very quickly. The challenge again is on an enterprise call where you've got maybe 3, 4, 5 different personalities, and each of them have got something different they want to hear. Similarly, a lot of the enterprise sales, as you're well aware, there'll be a champion is the person who's almost like the central person guiding it forward. Often they're the ones who it's in their interest to close the deal because they need it for something in their domain.
Incentivized.
Domain of responsibility. So it's about giving them the tool. So I would be saying to them, Ben, I know that you've got 2 or 3 other people that need to sign off on this. So we know that the finance person, tell me a bit about them. Like, how are we going to get them on board? Like, what type of asset or what type of messaging is going to resonate with them? Okay, we've got your CRO, who I can see is a flamboyant personality. How are we going to be able to navigate that? Because that's going to be, as you say, a different type of asset, different type of messaging. And let your champion, who anyway wants to close the deal, let them give you clues and help you get on board. And a lot of companies, they're not selling that way. They're copy-pasting the same method and use the internal people, the champions, to help you navigate the organization.
Exactly. So the champion is an incredible resource. It could kind of walk you through, ideally, it should walk you through the decision-making process and help you do that.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you identify a champion? I think that's an area where people have difficulty. Yeah.
I think, sometimes the champion isn't the champion because they've got limited authority in the company, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's, again, by asking smart questions and trying to work out within an organization what the product and its features are going to do and who's going to benefit most from those. Another way to look at it as is when you're selling, obviously a company needs to buy that product, buy that service, but you're very much selling through that person because it could be something very personal to them. They want to get promoted. They don't want to buy another product that doesn't work because their last one got hacked and they got the blame. I'll give you a classic example. When I was selling in my previous company, which was selling to universities, we were selling a software to them. And one of the components was helping fundraise. So I remember asking a question about the fundraising target. I wanted to get a bigger perspective of, through doing good discovery. And they said, yes, Simon, my target is $50 million for 2019 or whatever the year was. And I said, okay, interesting. And what was it last year? They said, oh, it's similar as well. How did you get on last year? I did 35. We did $35 million. So I said, well, what happens if you don't hit $50 million this year? And she said to me, I'll be honest with you, I'll lose my job. We won't be talking again in 3 months. So that's a big driver for that person to then buy a software which potentially can double their fundraising targets.
Phenomenal. What you did is you tied the acquiring of your product to their to her job success.
Exactly.
So then she's incentivized. This is a champion.
Yeah, she's incentivized, and you very much need to look at every deal and say, what's the business pain of the overall organization, and what are the personal motivations in some people to get this through. If you can't tap into that personal motivation, some of these deals will you end up being ghosted. They won't go all the way to the end. You need to figure out what their personal motivation is to go through the committee and keep pitching your product.
Exactly. So, but then they also have to believe that your product features and capabilities will actually help them attain that extra $15 million.
Correct.
But it also could be good enough. Like if you pay $10,000 for my fundraising product, and I help you get only $1 million more, I mean, that's already like, I don't know how much of a 1,000x ROI, right? So how do you, by the way, how did you do that in that company? How did you tie how did you make them believe the ROI?
Yeah, so
right?
in that case, as a salesperson, you can talk till you're blue in the face, but the best way to sell is to use third-party client endorsements of people that they respect in the industry. So you'd say, let me talk you through this particular case. We started working with X university because they had a similar problem. They also were struggling to hit their fundraising goals. We've now been working for them for 2 years. Year one, they went up 30%. Year two, it was 50% from the baseline. So you're giving them real examples of people they respect in the industry, and it's not a salesperson trying to twist or maneuver them. This is going to move the needle.
Exactly. So you use testimonials to kind of build up that belief.
For sure.
It sounds to me like, there's often CISO dinners, or you do like dinners with your kind of ICP, and the best practice is not that one of your salespeople or one of the co-founders would speak, but actually one of your clients.
Yeah.
Right?
It's exactly. I've had many examples of that. The best ones, the most effective ones I found to be at conferences, industry conferences. So I'd be pitching the product as a salesperson and to a prospect who obviously hasn't bought the software yet. And at the corner of my eye, I see someone walking past the booth who I recognize to be a client. What I would do in that scenario is, however good I can be at persuading and selling, I'm not going to be as effective as an existing client. I would actually step away and say, hey, Ben, I'm just going to grab a coffee, but I think you should speak to Mary over here because Mary is a client and I know that they had similar challenges to you. I'm just going to leave you guys to talk and, stay on the booth and do whatever, and then let's them sell on your behalf. That is as powerful as it gets.
Right, but but to get there are two things that kind of scare me, right?
Yeah.
One of the things is that what if this client, won't actually speak, in our favor?
Yeah.
And the second part is if I don't currently have any kind of testimonial, I'm just trying to get my first client. What do I do to build that trust?
Yeah.
Right?
So no, it's two interesting questions. The first one is, yes, you'd hope you'd have some sort of intel if it was a happy client, and for sure you wouldn't pass someone on that was struggling and was about to churn. That would be an own goal. You're right. And in terms of, sorry, what refresh me on the second part? No,
so the second one is, many of the startups that actually follow this podcast don't have their, a first client or a first good client. So how can they build trust or get that first testimonial?
So I think a lot of the way to do it is, you hear this word a lot, design partner, and to just be open that you can pretend that you've got 50 clients. There's no point doing that. So it's going to come crashing down and the sale will come crashing down as well. So just be very open. Like, we're a startup. We recently raised money. We're now going to product with this. Over the next 6 months, we want to sign 10, 15, 20 design partners who are not only going to be able to taste the product, but they're also going to be able to customize it for their own benefit as well. It's one of the advantage. We're only taking a limited amount of design partners for obvious reasons. We can't have 100 new clients. So some sort of exclusivity there as well, and some sort of call to action and some sort of scarcity where they need to follow up and not just say, call me back in 6 months. So,
Exactly.
yeah, it's always hard at the beginning, but I think the more open you are, that, we haven't got 100 paying clients yet, but we factor that into our pricing. Our pricing is going to be $50,000 a year, but for early adopters like yourselves, we're doing it for $25,000, and we're giving you these level of customizations.
Okay, so you're encouraging to kind of reach out very authentically to your ICP, saying, "Hey guys, we're just starting out. We're looking for design partners. We have only place for 3 design partners.
Yeah.
And their incentive is in the process that they kind of get to define the product with you according to their needs.
Exactly.
Something they won't get from a more mature competitor. Right?
For sure.
And then you could. But do you recommend charging that design partner? But do you recommend taking any sort of fee, or is that going to be for free?
It depends a lot on the product service. I work with a lot of early stage companies, and there's never like a right or wrong answer there. My personal preference is to have at least some sort of money on the table, just because I've seen too many of these design partnerships, free trials, where they're not paying anything and they don't then take it seriously. So
Right.
I think you can even say, like, we find even if it's a token amount of $5,000, $10,000 just to cover our basic setup costs, that's a good way, because then you've got some skin in the game. Obviously, it's way less than we would charge from next January. So I think you can explain it and rationalize it. So, but I do think it's better to have some sort of fee, so that it shows some sort of intent as well.
Right. So they should have skin in the game so they can take you seriously.
Yeah.
And actually, sounds totally fair. But how do you, if you could maybe walk us through the process that you recommend to the startups that work with you, how do you get from like no conversations with clients to having a design partner? What's that process looking like?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you want to make it as easy as possible. So often you have people who've got industry connections and they're setting up a particular software within a particular industry, and they come from that background. So they will have an existing network within their industry where they can reach out and be really open, because that's someone that they know that they've worked with before. So you need to really dig deep into your own network.
Investor network.
The investor networks, your own personal networks as a founder as well, and just see where there's some quicker wins or people that will be happy to take your call, and just be a bit vulnerable. So listen, as you probably saw, we've just raised some seed money, and here's a link to the article actually. So we're pretty early. What we're really looking at is people that can just help us a little bit, just get moving. So just looking for 2 or 3 key introductions. I saw you're connected on LinkedIn, or I know that you've mentioned in the past that you work with so-and-so company. Would you feel comfortable making it an introduction? So I think it's like anything. If someone stops you on the street and says, "Hey Ben, I'm really lost. Can you help me get to this particular location?" Most people won't walk straight past you and ignore you. They'll at least try and see if they can get out their own phone and guide you in the right direction. So I think just asking in the right way, using the right language and the right tone, can actually unlock a lot of introductions at that early stage.
Absolutely. So you're saying leverage your investor, your current, your close environments, connections to get those first conversations started.
Yeah.
And it's funny because people think that when they show authenticity, when they show vulnerability, they're actually more keen to being taken not seriously, or you have this fear that you might look too small to offer that company anything.
Yeah.
But in fact, I agree with you that showing vulnerability, asking for genuine feedback, and not thinking as if you have everything figured out, actually works far better than saying, "Oh, we know what we're doing. You'll be lucky if we help you."
Yeah, that's for sure the case. I think it's showing vulnerability. That's just, as you say, a more authentic human connection. People respond warmly to that, from my experience, especially at the early stage. They don't want to be the one that turned their back on a request for a company that was just getting started.
Right. So we had the conversation. Now we got some conversations going on. Is that a typical sales process? Like, do I show up with, I guess I would show up with my presentation that I've showed to the investors. Like, how is that sales process of getting a design partner would look like from there?
I think you'd almost run it as a regular sales process. You'd still do the same type of things. You'd still run a regular discovery. again, there's no point in them becoming a design partner and then you've got a name and a logo, but they wouldn't have good things to say about you. So it's in your interest also to pick the right design partners. Again, some of the companies I work with, we're looking at design partners and I say, no, we don't want to work with them. We're not big enough to cater for their needs, etc. We're not going to be able to use them as a case study testimonial going forward. The point of a design partner is to prove that the solution, the software works.
Mm-hmm.
So the way to do it is to be forensic about who you work with, and there'll be certain companies that are too big or too small that won't be helpful to you at that point in time. So the way you do that is through a regular discovery process. So you're still doing a regular sales discovery process, asking the right questions, tapping into the motivations, looking at what an ROI would be, even through a 3 to 6 month design partnership, what they can expect to gain compared to where they are today.
Right, but that to me, what you said is very clear. Like I know how to kind of walk myself through that process. But let's say I'm a technical founder, so I've been able to raise money for my project, meaning I do have some kind of salesmanship, or I know how to convince people. But doing like a proper discovery, plugging into motivations, quantifying the pain, showing the ROI, these are practices that even for salespeople are pretty hard to achieve. So how do you recommend that the technical founder would go around it? I'm not saying, like the Pareto rule for how to get it right.
Yeah, look, that's often a challenge because often the first 5, 10, 15, 20 deals are done by the founders who are, as you say, often from a technical background and not from a sales background. So part of it is just to instill the right practices. I've got companies I've worked with where I review their calls with the founder and they're speaking like 97% of the time because they're so enthused about their solution. And they're saying to me, well, we're not closing any deals. What's going on here? You've got to be able to have some clear guidelines about asking questions, about listening properly, about how to structure a proposal, how to follow up as well, when to follow up. All of these things need to be coached into the founders to a certain extent. Albeit that they might only be doing this for 6 months and they know that they're then going to hire a sales team or people on the sales side to do this professionally. Those first deals are critical. So the founders themselves need to be coached, and we do a lot of role plays and things that are going to assist them and objection handling, etc. Because, if they're not closing those first 5, 10, 20 design partnerships, then could be goodbye to the company pretty early on.
Exactly. So how do you recommend that they get these resources? Is that something that you do at Pipe Global?
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's lots of options on the market. That is something I do because it's such a clear challenge for companies. If you can get those first 10, 20 deals and the right logos and set them up in the right way so that you're set up for success and not just to say you've got a design partnership, then that can unlock a Series A round. It can unlock a lot of stuff, momentum and buzz in the market. But I think sometimes you just give them some sales books to read if they haven't got the time to invest in proper sales training. But certainly their founders need guidance, and you're seeing more and more of founders coming to sales workshops because they themselves want to understand how to sell. They know how critical it is, even if it's going to be over a short period of time. Right.
So you're saying every founder should kind of go through some level of sales training so that they know how to nail each of the steps right to get those first deals or design partners.
Yeah.
What would the high level process or syllabus kind of look like that they have to get? What are like the 4 or 5 things that they have to get in place before going on those calls?
I think the baseline of everything is your sales mindset. I do a lot of coaching around this because we both know how difficult it is when you're getting rejected or no's. You don't always know why they've said no. You're getting ghosted. We know how difficult it is, but we're tenacious as salespeople. That's why we do sales. As a founder, you can very quickly have a negative energy and not put yourself out. So that's number one. You need to have, that sort of sales belief. You've also got to be able to get a right balance between being really enthusiastic about your product, which clearly that's a great way to sell because you're transferring your belief and enthusiasm for the product, versus going too technical and not actually, again, not asking the right questions and finding out if the service is even of any value, etc. So a lot of it would be around how to set up a discovery type call. It would be how to present. So a lot of the founders I work with, when they're first presenting their product, they're going on a guided tour, click here, do this, and they're going through every
kind of feature dump.
Every feature. So you want to get them away from feature-based selling, and you want them to say, like, I only want, give them challenges. I only want you to do 3 clicks or show 3 features of the platform. But obviously you only want to do the ones where there's a real need. So you need to ask the right questions at the beginning, and then don't show them the whole platform. In any event, they're not going to remember every click. And you can, sometimes the answer to the question is, yes, we can do that. Doesn't mean you do a 10-minute detour and click here, do this, and it suddenly looks like really complicated. The other thing is sales is obviously a complex career, but you've got to try where possible to keep it as simple as possible. And what you're probably looking to do, especially at the beginning, is remove friction from the buyer's process. So people that aren't used to doing it as founders, they're giving them tasks or things to do. They don't realize that the more friction, it could be pricing friction, it could be adoption across the company, it could be like how to sync with an API. You've got to show them it's as easy as possible. So you've got to weave that into your pitch. Not only can we do this, this, or this, but it's going to take 2 weeks, and we need like a 1-hour onboarding call, and then you'll be good to go. That's a missing piece that a lot of founders don't get, because if everything's great, but I think it's a 6-month long process, I'm going to walk away as a buyer.
Right. So you're saying the mindset is behind everything, right? You got to be able to face those rejections, keep going, keep shaping your sales process until you get it right.
Yeah.
Right. That tenacity that naturally salespeople have is not something that typically, founders do. But in fact, founders are very much salespeople.
Sure.
Right?
They've raised money. You have to be a good salesperson to raise the money.
Exactly. And then you got to, to have this level of enthusiasm regarding your product. Like, you can say whatever you want, but the person sitting in front of you is going to question, like, does he even believe what he's saying?
Yeah.
In the energy of the founder and the energy of the one presenting, you can feel it.
Yeah.
Does he believe what he says?
Yeah.
Right. So that level of enthusiasm is critical. And then you have to have the process in mind, right?
Yeah.
To the best practices, quote unquote, to not, to uncover pain and then demo the features that are related to that pain, not more, not less.
Yeah.
Right. Kind of tailor the demo. Don't just do a feature dump of all of the different capabilities, which is true. I also see, like, my founder is, my partner is a PhD in computer science.
Yeah.
So the guy is super proud of what he's built.
Yeah.
And his demos typically drag around because he's showing this click and that feature and that integration, but it doesn't relate to what this person we just met was speaking about.
Yeah.
So you have to have this kind of a sensitivity to know what to show and when to stop showing, actually, question.
I've been in meetings with people, like, face-to-face meetings, obviously, where I've kicked colleagues under the table at a meeting because they need to stop talking. Sometimes it's just, do I need to carry on for another 2 minutes, or should I stop, pause? Again, let them make the sale for me almost. Let them talk. If you're talking 80-90% of the time as a founder, as a regular salesperson, your chances of closing a deal are dramatically going to drop.
Exactly. Yeah. So by the way, what are some best practices to get your client talking?
I think it's, you've got to bear in mind that not everyone wants to talk and open up. You've got to ask questions in a non-threatening way, in a not a very obviously sales-related way, and just more open questions. You've got to ask open questions that they feel comfortable expanding. Then you've got to demonstrate from maybe the follow-up question that you really listen to their answer, so that you haven't just got 6 questions and you're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The question number 2 is saying, oh, you mentioned, Ben, this. With that in mind, how would you deal with this scenario? So you're really listening. People want to feel listened to. If you're a good listener in sales, you're way ahead of a lot of salespeople that are struggling to meet target. It's not an easy skill to be able to listen.
Exactly. It's not just waiting for your turn to speak. It's actually, just genuinely listening. And then when you have a genuine question or a follow-up question, then you just go ahead and ask. Because people often, and myself included, at the beginning, I was like just waiting for my turn to speak. I wasn't really actively listening.
Yeah.
But then I saw the benefits of being able to precisely reflect what this person was just saying.
Yeah.
It makes them feel heard.
Yeah.
It makes them kind of,
Yeah.
get comfortable in the seat, and it opens them up.
Yeah.
In fact, I've done it countless times in this episode alone.
Yeah.
You're speaking. I'm not even asking a question. I'm just reflecting back to you what you just said.
Yeah.
And it keeps you going, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it comes back to mirroring, and it's a natural skill to be able to do that. And it's even having some copy-paste phrases up your sleeve. If I'm hearing you right, did I understand this correctly? From what you're saying, it appears that, and sometimes mirroring their exact language or using industry language terms that they're going to be comfortable with talking about. So there's a great study of, I think it was in Holland, where they wanted to work out why people were getting the best tips. It was called the copycat cafe experiment. And the people who were repeating the order word for word got way higher tips than the people that would sort of go around the houses and general summaries of what everyone wanted. So when you hear your own words, even subconsciously, you don't realize they're doing it. It's the level of trust goes way up.
Right. So reflecting back to people what they just said, even precisely word by word, actually raise the tips for those waitresses.
Yeah, correct.
It's amazing. I think there's also so you got reflecting, and also there is labeling.
Yeah.
Right. Which is like, we do that on our sales calls, as when we ask, wow, what's your sales process look like? Like how long is your typical sales process? And they go, whatever they say, as long as it's not lower than 2 months.
Yeah.
I've instructed my SDRs to say, oh, wow, it sounds like there's a lot of back and forth before they make a purchase. Just that sentence. Yeah. And you see on countless calls how they're like, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I feel like their secretary.
Yeah.
It opens up pain.
For sure.
And that's labeling. That's not even reflecting. It's like kind of implying an emotion on that.
Yeah. If people feel heard, then that's half the battle in the sales thing, because they can tie it to the need to buy the product.
Exactly. In fact, I have a weird story about that. When I was a teenager, I was very shy of going and meeting girls or approaching girls. So what I would do is I would follow this. I don't know. It's like a sales coach, but for women, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I would go to girls and I would ask a couple of questions, kind of open them up, and then the moment they would ask me a question back was the moment that I would just answer and shut up.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's when that's a flip moment.
Yeah.
Where you've invested so much energy, and now that she asked a question shows intent, and you should shut up.
Yeah. Wait for the follow-up question.
Exactly. You let her feed the conversation now.
Yeah.
Is that applicable to sales, or is this like an embarrassing?
No. All of this stuff, because it all comes back to listening. It all comes back to having a tactical approach to a call. Because a lot of salespeople are very reactive. They'll just go with the flow of the conversation, and they're constantly moving. And you can see that they're not really in control of a conversation. In control doesn't mean speaking a lot. It can mean listening better as well. Just that controls the narrative and where the conversation goes. Exactly.
So you could control the frame by just asking the right questions. You don't have to be the one speaking. I guess on that note, discovery questions is a big pain, not only for sellers. Everybody struggles with what are the right questions to ask. So just, Simon, what is your approach to asking the right questions?
I wish it was so easy to say these are the type of questions you ask, because you've got to really drill down into the industry, the personas, the pain. So even within a company, you're going to sell it slightly differently to, again, like a operational financial person in the same company, versus if you manage to get someone who's sort of technician on the phone, for example, versus if you get someone from marketing who are part of the decision process as well. So you've got to be a bit of a chameleon where you're able to adapt. But the first point is to basically map the company and say, okay, Ben is the CEO of the company. What's Ben's typical characteristics? Ben is like very driven. He hasn't got time to deal with things. He needs to outsource stuff. He's getting pressure from the board. I've almost got to put myself in your shoes as a persona within the industry, and then have discovery questions based on that, and bring in like third-party references as well. Like if you're like other companies, when it comes to a cyber breach, this is the knock-on effects of what that looked like. Is that a concern for you as well? When I spoke to Company X, who you obviously know they're related in some way, that they see them as a competitor or someone they respect, you can name drop at the right point of time, so it has more power as well.
Right. So you're saying you have to adapt your questions not only to the product, but actually to the industry, to the persona. Right. You have to get into those details.
Yeah.
It's just that, to me, it feels like I just don't know how to standardize the discovery process.
Right.
Any idea how I should do that?
The discovery process, I think part of it, again, is trial and error. You're asking the questions and you're seeing which questions people generally are talking about more, because sometimes the assumption you make when you're researching it isn't quite correct for whatever reason. So you've got to be able to look back on a call, look back at a meeting and see what went right, what went wrong. I've got a company I'm working with in a specific, genre space at the moment where they're selling to 6 different personas, the same product basically. There's 6 different types of buyers and they're wildly different. You've got creative types who are buying the product compared to just hard-nosed business people who just need to say, can I double my money on this? But it's the same product. And you've got to completely have a different discovery process.
And they have a different discovery process for each of those?
You have to, because if you're speaking to someone who's just interested in ROI, something that's very wow from a look and feel perspective, they don't care. It's like, what is in it for me? Whereas someone who's more of a creative designery type and you're talking about ROI and money and figures and data and graphs, they don't care, just want it to look really nice. The product needs to enhance what they're doing day to day. So if you mix and match those things the wrong way, you'll burn both those leads.
Exactly. So you cannot have like a one-size-fits-all discovery process. If you're reaching out, let's say if you're reaching out to the same ICP within the same industry, then go for it. Standardize that process.
Sure. Yeah.
But if you're selling to different industries, or in fact your first meetings are often with different type of personas that care about different things, you have to reframe those questions.
Yeah.
The base could be your product capabilities, right? If I, for example, help with deal visibility or forecasting or I don't know, buyer-seller collaboration, then these are my product values. But I would have to reframe the questions to the different personas that I get on the call, because they care about different things. For example, I sell to revenue operations people, but also sell to VP of sales.
Yeah.
So the RevOps people care about, I don't know, that data accuracy and making sure there's no orphan technology.
Yeah.
And the product is the same product. And in fact, they're even in the same industry, could be in the same freaking company.
Yeah.
But they speak completely different languages. They have different KPIs. And it's interesting. I mean, it only complicates my discovery standardization process, but it yields more results.
It yields more results. And look, you mentioned about languages. I know this wasn't the intent of why you mentioned languages, speaking different languages, but culturally as well. You could be selling to financial people a product in, say, massive different territories. You could be selling to Japan versus Germany
Latin
versus
America.
UK versus Spain. All of them are going to, without labeling them all exactly the same, they're going to buy in different ways. They're going to have a different culture. They're going to, in Japan, there's a certain way of asking questions that will be different in Germany, etc., compared to if you're selling, even within the US, there's massive regional differences. If you're selling to someone in the South who wants to have a bit more of a chat and more talk about the sports game at the weekend versus like maybe someone on the East Coast is like, okay, tell me what this does. You've got to be able to adapt all the time to those types of things, even if it's the same persona in inverted commas.
Right. So geography is also kind of, in fact, in Mexico, you sign deals on a tequila.
Yeah.
You have to do it face to face. It's not. In Japan, it's a market that you have to go to when you're very mature. Like there's no second chances in the Japanese market, right? So you also kind of adapt to the geographies that your ICP is in. Yeah. And you mentioned earlier something about sellers being reactive rather than like intentionally leading the process. Yeah. And can you maybe explain more a little bit about that? Yeah.
I think it comes down to a lot of sellers that you see or work with. They're skilled in certain ways, but they're not controlling conversations. I mean, classically, when a really red hot lead that's definitely going to close in Q4 goes cold, sometimes you could have done a lot of work before that so it doesn't go cold. You could have mitigated the risk there, for example, as well. So I think you're not setting it up properly. If you can't go into the CRM and show me why that is at 90% likelihood to buy, and these are the 2 or 3 reasons why they're buying, rather than they sounded keen and it's something they need. If you can't explain it to me as a sort of the sales leader, the CEO, for example, then you probably haven't mapped out that sales process properly, and you're just bouncing around depending on the individual deal itself. And that is a trap a lot of salespeople fall into. The client says this, and suddenly they jump in that direction, and there's no control whatsoever. I don't mean control like dominating conversations. I mean being able to shape, frame, collaborate in the right way.
Being able to kind of understand the decision-making process of selling your product and buying the product, and kind of knowing what is the next step to win it, but not just kind of assuming, I've been in touch with the champion actually a month and a half ago, but this is a completely 90% likelihood, right?
Yeah. But I read something interesting recently that said that obviously sales have changed a lot in the last 10, 15 years. Like when I was selling you a car 10, 15 years ago, I went to the garage and I was completely at your mercy. You could tell me anything and I would have to believe it. This is why you should buy this car. This is why you shouldn't buy this car. Now I can go to the garage and I spent an hour researching it. I've spoken to 3 people. I've gone to these websites, etc. And all I need you to do is like show me how to unlock the door and get in and drive it. And that's the same in B2B, and it's the same in the SaaS enterprise, etc. as well. There's a lot more information out there for buyers. There's all the Gartners and reports and testimonials. There's so much more information out there. So part of the challenge to get deals done, I saw, and it resonates seeing what I've seen, is that you've got to help buyers. Buying products is now more complicated than ever. Your job as a salesperson is to help that buyer navigate their own challenges to buy your software. And it's not like when they come to the call, again, they've often done a lot of research. They've often spoken to 2 or 3 competitors. They often know where your solution fits in around the industry. So sellers have to adopt and know that the balance of power has changed a bit more towards the buyer, but the buyer needs help still to navigate their own internal challenges.
Exactly. So the B2B buying process become way more complex, right? I mean, you spoke about days when the seller had the upper hand because he held the information, and then it developed into now the buyer has the upper hand because he has access to all of your competitors, all the information out there. And I think it even developed to another complexity where the sale actually happens, the majority of the sale actually happens when you're not in the room shaping things.
Correct.
So helping your buyer it's not that your buyer has lack of information. Sellers thinks that if they send another PDF or another testimonial or another stuff, it will make the decision easier for your buyer. In fact, it makes it harder because they don't have information problem. They have information indigestion problem.
It's a great point. And in fact, one of the best flips, I suppose, I made in my sales career was looking at sales in a different way. So I think a lot of salespeople look at sales as a game of chess. Your prospect moves here. Okay, so I've now got to move there. Oh wow, they've moved there. I've now got to react and move there. But as soon as you get out of that mindset and go into more collaboration mindset, just having that collaboration mindset can open everything up. I remember I made quite a good sale that I was quite proud of, and I got feedback from the client which changed the way I sell in this way. They said, you didn't feel like someone selling me the product. It felt like you were a colleague helping me, bring in this. So, and that, I thought, wow, I didn't necessarily think of it in that mind. But if I can always try and position myself as someone who's enabling them, collaborating with them on the same side of the table as them, if I can just see in any sales process, if I'm there or nowhere near there, that could actually unlock a lot of sales, and it has. And a lot of my sales methodology and philosophy is how can we collaborate better rather than, again, this chessboard and you move, I move, you move, I move.
Right. So it's also about, so the chess mindset is not only about like what are the moves that you make to kind of match your opponent.
Yeah.
It's also about like getting rid of that mindset. It's both. It's 2 things. If I'm getting it right, it's one in the mindset, like the fact that I see my buyer as an opponent is already underlying my ability to sell. So I should see him as a friend I could help with. Maybe that's a nice reframing.
Yeah.
And also it comes down to what do you do to lead the sales process. The way you share information, like you're sharing objective information, you kind of help them, like you said, like a colleague helping them make a decision to get over a problem rather than someone solely pitching his product, caring about his quota, right? Having this quota breadth.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's interesting because it feeds into something I do a lot of coaching around, which is handling objections. And when I start the session around objection handling, I always say object comes from the Latin to throw towards. Like object means to throw something towards you, which is seen as an aggressive act. So we always think an objection is an aggressive act. I'm saying forget what you think about objections. You've got to bring them in. You can't close a sale until you've teased them out. And the longer the objection's held, the stronger it's held. So really, and the classic example I give is the courtroom. Like, objection, Your Honour, you've got the prosecution on that table, the defence. They're representing different interests. So we're primed to think an objection is bad, it's aggressive, it's undermining what we're doing, rather than no, objection is the way for them to clarify how to buy.
Right. So you're really taking it into, how to say that, like the mindset behind the situation is really guiding the path you're taking there, right?
Yeah.
That's very interesting. By the way, any best practices to kind of get out of your own, I'm sorry for the language, get out of your own ass.
Yeah.
And actually see things from the buyer perspective? Anything you recommend to your?
I think we need to understand how people, including ourselves, make decisions. So a lot of people will say, what sales books do you recommend? And obviously there's some classic sales books or other sales materials I've read that I can recommend. But most of the reading I do, and I'm boring, I don't read novels. I just read like, I read like biographies, etc. But I also read a lot of books around psychology, almost like how people think, how we make decisions, how we react to situations. And it's not just about sales, it's about life in general. I'm fascinated by the psychology around humans and also how that ties into sales. So I think if we can understand what makes people tick, what makes people decide about something. It's interesting in sales that people are always surprised to hear this. It was a piece of work done by Daniel Kahneman, the Israeli economist who won the Nobel Prize for this piece of work, which is, and it's been proven time and time again since he originally did it, which is people are twice as likely to not want to actualize a loss as to realize a gain. So if I said, hey, Ben, if you do this, you can make $100. You go, oh, $100, that's quite nice. But you might think, yes, no, I'm busy today, I'm not going to make that $100. Exact opposite, if I say, Ben, if you don't do this, you're going to lose $100, twice as likely, proven time and time again, that you're going to not want to have a loss against your name effectively, compared to, even though it's the same net thing, it's $100 in either direction. So then with that in mind, that's knowing that type of psychology about how we operate, how humans operate, how do we then frame things in the sales process that will tap into that loss aversion, as it's been labeled?
Yeah, loss aversion, right. So if I bring it down to the ground into, like, let's say quantification stage,
yeah,
right? Let's say we now, people approach me and say, Ben, I want to accelerate my deal cycle.
Yeah.
I want to accelerate my sales cycle. So what I'm actually looking for is for their deal slippage.
Yeah.
Right. I want to know how much is in quota deals slipping or taking them, not the other way around, like looking for the acceleration, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, and what's the ramifications of missing your quarter? If I understand rightly, we spoke in Q2, you also didn't hit in Q2. So you're saying you didn't hit in Q3 either. Wow. And that just sometimes just let that slip. I know you've got a great product and it's a shame because we know we could get you on track, that type of thing. So it's really trying to sometimes put it into blunt ROI terms. That's the damage. A classic example would be like cybersecurity. When you're selling a cybersecurity product, it's not just to protect, it's like
playing on fear.
What happens if you're breached? Well, we're a bank, so we're gonna have massive reputational damage. People are gonna pull their money out. We're gonna get a $100 million fine from the regulator in the US. There's 4, 5, 6 painful reasons why you don't want to take that chance.
Yeah, so kind of getting your client to admit a certain fear of loss, is a great outcome in a discovery call, right? Because you get them play on it. But I find, I myself, I had a lot of struggle with even asking those type of questions because I didn't want my buyer to feel as if he's being led into like a sales trap, right? He's asking this now so we can quantify, so we can then use it against me, quote unquote.
I don't think it's used against. I think it's like it's coming into that mindset where I want to hear a bit more about your challenges. We do speak to a lot of other, insert the sort of category of company. What they often tell us is, I know it doesn't hold true for any company, you're asking in a gentler way, is that the case for you as well? And they can say, no, we haven't really got that pain. That's for other people to deal with. Or they can say, yes, it is something. Until now, we've managed it in this way. But it's all about gentle questioning, probing gently rather than aggressive, that they feel that you're manhandling them into that scenario.
Yeah, and you could also ask for permission in a way, right? The way my talk track is that, look, I want to ask you this kind of questions because I know that if you like it and you're gonna go asking for budget, it's gonna have to click for the executives. They need to know their exact ROI. So if you could help me kind of figure out here a couple of questions so I can better build with you the business case.
Yeah.
Right. And then you kind of have permission to ask him like quantifying questions. How much is that costing you today?
Yeah.
I think that helped me kind of ask the hard questions.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it because you're effectively putting yourself in their position, saying, listen, that sounds, you empathetic things like that sounds really challenging. That can't be easy for you. I'm sure that's something that's constantly like over your head. Just showing that empathy. Once you show the empathy, then it doesn't feel like you're ramming a sales product down their throat. Which
is connecting to your approach about psychology in sales, right? Empathy is something that could literally, catalyze your discovery process.
Yeah.
The fact that you show empathy, but no sales book, that I've read, is telling you to show empathy at that stage, right?
Yeah, I think that so much of this is about psychology. So much of general business is about psychology, but sales in particular, when I think of some of the people that I've hired over time, I've hired a lot of people from non-sales backgrounds. I've hired like social workers, for example, because they're about as empathetic as you get. They're taking like troubled situations, et cetera, teachers, because they're like good communicators. You sometimes got to look at people that can tap in to emotions, that can listen, that can show empathy. And if they can do that in one type of scenario, then there's no reason why they couldn't do that in sales as well quite often.
Right. Sounds like, people's people could be great sellers.
Yeah, for sure.
You're hitting a nice point here. I think that maybe we could kind of correlate it to hiring. Either it's the first salesperson, or just another salesperson. What are some, let's say I have limited budget because I'm a startup and I want to hire a good salesperson. That has the potential, not necessarily has the experience. So how could I identify potential?
I think, first of all, you look a little bit about what they've done, obviously references, etc. I tend to go a lot on my gut instinct. Maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but I don't believe so much in references because by the time you give me a reference, I once heard someone giving a reference, overheard them giving a terrible reference about someone. But generally, you'll assume that the references, they're going to line them up and they'll say nice things, otherwise they wouldn't refer them. So I've then got to go a lot on my gut instinct. So part of it is other patterns of behavior, how they've dealt with tenacious situations within sales. But I look a lot outside. So, for example, I've hired a lot of people who were like ultra marathon runners. They were like, when they were younger, they were ballet dancers and they used to spend 7 hours a week, 10 hours a week after school practicing. So they've got that discipline, they've got that habit forming. So I'm looking for evidence outside of, yes, I hit target last quarter, of a personality trait that's showing tenacity, that's showing that they can form habits, that they can do things differently one day to the next if something's working better. So I believe that personality is very, very important as much as previous results.
Exactly. So you're saying kind of hire the characteristics rather than the experience.
It depends on the industry.
Could be both of them.
If you can get both, great. But I often find anyway, it can be sometimes the younger, hungrier people who it has to work for them rather than the sort of classic salesperson who's taking a job every 2 years and they always seem to get referenced and manage to get a job, but they've had 10 jobs in 20 years versus someone who's on their second or third job and they need to really lay down a marker and make this fly off the page, this particular role. So you're looking for, it's hard to describe, but you sort of, after doing it a lot of times, you can almost tell if someone's saying that they're hungry versus if someone really is, and it's almost infectious, their energy.
Right. So it's by the way, it's a very uncommon I don't know, opinion about hiring processes that
Yeah.
you don't really so much rely on references. What is your hiring process like? High level.
High level, yeah. Obviously, you want to be specific about what you're looking for, because the danger is you just get inundated with people that aren't really qualified for the role. So obviously, to get a proper description,
Define the role, define the person.
You define the role, and I think a lot of these roles, they're copying and pasting the same thing they saw from another company. They all look the same. So I think sometimes put the personality of the company into that role. So show why you're different to just any other company out there, for example. So I think it's important to show what you're looking for and why you're looking for that, which ties in together. And then, yeah, it is about open conversation. I'm not trying to trick people or get them to mess up on an interview question, but I'm just forming. I mean, my feeling about this is it doesn't need to be a 2-3 hour interview. I used to be made fun of a lot in one of my previous companies. I used to tell within 15-20 minutes, particularly for SDRs, if I wanted to hire them. And the truth is, it wasn't even 15-20 minutes. It was usually 2 minutes, to be honest. You can tell very quick. I can tell definitely in 30 seconds sometimes if they're not the right fit. But if someone's often that first impression, that first 2, 3, 4 minutes, it carries on all the way through. But think of it in the sales process. You don't have half an hour on a demo to say, do I trust Ben? Is this the right guy that I want to buy this software with? Do I believe everything he's saying? You've got to do that in the first 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes. So I'm almost putting them into a sales scenario. If I believe them straight away, hopefully their prospects will. If I'm thinking, wait a sec, this doesn't sound quite right, or this doesn't sound like I can believe what this person's saying, then how am I going to hire that person?
Wow. It reminds me of my first SDR interview. I came from selling cosmetics or telemarketing, very B2C, into selling to Fortune 500 entities.
Yeah.
And he had to identify potential in me.
Yeah.
And in fact, I spoke in retrospective with my head of SDR, John. He really shaped the way I'm doing deals to this day.
Amazing.
And he told me that in the first, like you said, in the first 5-6 minutes, once he heard some of the stories that I shared with him, he knew it was the right decision.
Yeah.
And from my perspective, actually, which is the flip side of things, and I like to get your take on that, is like when we sat, I mirrored him. I tried my best to not make it seem very obvious. But as he was lying backwards, I was laying backwards. I was done all of this.
Yeah.
So,
the mirroring completely works, and I try and coach a lot of people to do it, because some people know how to do it, some people don't even know they're doing it, and some people can be coached to do it better. There's a great survey from the Harvard Business School, which was something like win someone over, talk like them. And obviously you've got to be careful not to mimic and not to, but if someone's speaking fast, I need to actually increase my pace a bit of delivery. Similarly, if I'm speaking, someone really slows it down and I'm going 100 miles an hour, something's not translating across to them. So we've got to be able to do that without forcing it too much. You've got to be really good at mirroring that. So it's interesting that you say that, because they probably came away from that interview not only thinking I've got the right person in Ben, but we're similar. We can get on.
Instinctively.
Yeah, without even knowing it's because you were doing this. It's just a lot of what we do is body language, actually. So it can be words, so words and tone, but body language is really important in these meetings, and especially over Zoom as well. We're obviously face to face now, but over Zoom you can tell a lot from how their room's set up and how they're leaning back, etc. There's a lot of clues even over Zoom.
Yeah. So you're saying the body language you're using could kind of directly impact the way the other party is perceiving you and help you build trust, help you he doesn't know why he liked me, but he liked me. One of the reasons he liked it is because I kind of mirrored his body language and he felt naturally more open with me.
Sure.
Right? So those things also influence the decision without even us understanding this. I mean, salespeople do understand this typically.
They do, but it goes further than a lot of salespeople realize, which it's I do some training around what's called digital body language. So how do you do that in WhatsApp communication, in LinkedIn, in email, in regular communication outside of a meeting, a voice? So part of that could be, again, not making it too obvious. I remember one of the sales I did, this is going back a long time ago. It's my first WhatsApp sale, if you like. I was trying to get hold of a decision maker at university and just couldn't get hold of them. But I think there was an out of office with his PA's number. So called, missed the call. So I thought, okay, send a WhatsApp straight away. Sent it, and I could see straight away she was like really chatty with like emoji. So I started sending emojis back, not too obviously, and not like crazy, like matching each emoji, but that for a start.
All of a sudden, a ninja emoji. And,
exactly, but for a start, something like WhatsApp is a much more consistent communication channel. You don't usually go 3 days between WhatsApps compared to emails. Where if you on an email channel, it could be 3 days, and it's taken 2-3 weeks, and you've answered 2 questions. WhatsApp, that could be within 20 minutes because you know they're online, for example.
Exactly.
So so mirroring the sort of words they use. Do they use like long or short words? Do they use industry language? Do they say, "How was your weekend? You're looking forward to Christmas," versus, tell me what's happening here. You've got to mirror that. If someone over email, WhatsApp is quite short to the point language, don't send them a 20-line email. Send them like a 2-line email because that's how they digest information. So everything around body language is important, but don't only do it on the call itself.
So you're saying that the way you communicate, if they communicate with you on WhatsApp with an emoji, then you can kind of mirror that as well.
But don't make it too obvious. And I always remember back in the day when, people, classic example, you're speaking to someone who is like foreign to that country, and they've got like a Spanish accent, a German accent, an Italian accent, and it's amazing how many people will almost without realizing it start using an Italian accent even in English, whereas that's never how they would speak. And it's not done on purpose and it's not done to mock them, but you've got to do it in a way that's not too obvious as well.
Yeah, but the term digital body language is something I've never heard, by the way. So I'm curious how it puts into practice. You got the WhatsApp communication example. You have any other example?
No, so WhatsApp, for example, is less formal. So you're not going to go, "Dear Ben, further to your email on further to your message on the 25th of February, I want to ascertain." You're going to speak in a much more casual, direct language, I think, which I think lends itself better. Shorter messages. It's actually it's often a friend's channel as well. So I think it's actually a better channel to switch to within reason. I do a lot of my work, even the companies I consult, over WhatsApp, just because
it's easier.
I think it's easier, and I think it's better rapport based as well. Like I can see in the tone of messages, if we're not speaking regularly, that the WhatsApp is a quicker way to the rapport than just sending emails, for example. And emails, you can, there's even like AI tools out there now to analyze every email you're getting. But even before that, I would look at an email and say, okay, does Ben want something like really detailed? I can see that he's asked 7 questions, so I'm going to have to answer all those 7 one by one. Versus, does he just want one more sort of thing to take back to his board in order to get this over the line? In which case, I'm going to just send this like 2-line job, and hopefully that will do it. But again, it is to do with like LinkedIn, for example, is obviously another popular channel. LinkedIn is a bit closer to WhatsApp. It can be a bit more casual. You can swap 10 messages within half an hour, which is rarely the case I find on email. Sometimes it is, but it's just generally a slower channel. So I try and encourage people I work with to try and switch to those channels where you can get rapport better, get quicker answers as well.
Exactly. It's like, so you're saying adapt your communication to the channel that you're communicating through. And in fact, I heard a sentence that's saying, if you can't text your champion, do you really have a champion?
Yeah, that's a good one. There's even things like Slack. Other channels, you might be able to just, log onto their Slack, message them directly on Slack. There's that possibility as well, because that's how they digest information as well. But yeah, you obviously want their permission before. And you can even say, like, I know you get on the next call and you can say, I know we swapped about 10 emails the last couple of weeks, is there a better channel to reach you? And I can see sometimes, you're not able to respond in the first couple of days. Yeah, you know what? Please, here's my number and just send me WhatsApp because I'm on WhatsApp all the time.
Exactly. I even ask about
it. Ask.
I'm cold calling someone. Let's say I actually cold call an executive in a really, publicly traded, multi-billion-dollar company. And I asked him, he asked me for more information. I said, do you prefer WhatsApp or an email? He said, absolutely WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Glad you asked. He was glad I asked because he's super busy.
He doesn't want to get emails. He's thinking, why did he send me another email? Yeah. I've got enough email. I had 100 emails already. And it's just another thing. I think that people get to WhatsApps quicker generally. So yeah, it's about permission-based, getting the right, and using the right channel to get that rapport going and do a shortcut towards getting the deal over the line.
Absolutely. Okay, so just to kind of summarize in the conversation, your approach is very, very collaborative.
Yes.
You have your systems or processes that the anchor points, I would even say, that you want to go through in a sales process, but everything is done in a very collaborative mindset. You see your buyer as someone that you need help. You kind of help him get through the process, not as someone that you need to sell to, kind of convince. And then you use a lot of different psychology nuances that help you build deeper connections, deeper empathy, that makes that makes the sell easier, essentially, because that person is more inclined to share pains with you. That person is more giving you more candid responses or feedback, and helps you map the org and helps you get through the process. So that's a nice combination. Like, I think the underlying takeaway here is that your buyer is a friend that you need to help to. Yeah. And you can use all of those things to do it even better. Yeah. But just that mindset will already get you very far. Yeah,
no, I'll just put one other thing that I haven't mentioned as well. Like, just before you send that message, before you say that thing on the call, almost think, would I, as a buyer, like to receive that email, receive that WhatsApp, etc.? So if it's like, haven't heard from you in a while, just bumping this to the top of your inbox, would I personally like to receive that? Or would that be like, well, hang on a sec, I know how to manage my inbox. There's a reason why I didn't get back to you. Just always put yourself in the shoes of the buyer before you send a message, before you say something on a call. Right. How well is that going to be received? And if you wouldn't want to receive that message, chances are don't your buyer wouldn't either.
Even though when you say that, I mean, I have a best practice in our SDR process is that on the third message to someone that actually has been in the pipeline or something like that, is like, you wanted to do this, but we never heard back from you. Where would you like to take things from here? It's a message we send. It's very concrete, kind of nudging. Yeah. And honestly, it's been very effective. I mean, I wouldn't like to receive it because it kind of implies that I've done something wrong, but it's very effective in getting the response. So I'm curious, like, how does that align with not sending a message that you wouldn't like to receive?
I think it's also people just want closure one way or the other. So even though I wouldn't phrase it myself
that way,
but I still want to either have an out or to be able to. I think so when you put it into that perspective, even though I wouldn't necessarily use that term, I would like that option. So in that case, it would sit okay.
Gotcha. Okay, so just any books, any podcasts, I don't know, resources that you recommend are
I mean, in terms of a book, I like a couple of sales books. One of them is called To Sell is Human by Daniel Pink. Awesome. Which is a great book because it's real life examples, not from a classic salesperson, but it really gets to the bottom of what sales is about. So it's a great introduction to people who are in sales often and don't want to consider themselves in sales. If you're running any business, doesn't matter what it is, you're in sales. If you're a physio, a florist, you're in sales, like it or not. So that's a great book. And then on the more technical side, Influence by Robert Cialdini, which really goes into touching a bit on the psychology of what motivates people, goes through all the different types of ways of influence within the sales process. So those are two books I highly would recommend. As I said, the second one is a bit more in depth. It's more like a thick biology textbook. It's a lot of pages, but it's well worth the read. And in fact, both of them are on LinkedIn and posting relatively regularly under their own name, so worth a follow as well. And in terms of podcasts, I like one which isn't a sales podcast at all, but it's just I like to learn from successful people, and it's called Diary of a CEO by Stephen Bartlett in the UK, and he's interviewed like a crazy amount of like household names and what motivates them, and they really get to open up. It might be Jurgen Klopp, it might be Richard Branson, it could be anyone. I mean, those are people who've appeared on it, and you can learn something even from someone that's untouchable. I'm never going to be a football manager, but you can learn a lot from where they've been successful as well.
Right. So the Daniel Kahneman, book is the first book I've read about sales too, by the way.
Thinking Fast and Slow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've read that as well. Yeah.
And so I'm sorry, Daniel Pinkman.
Oh, Daniel Pink. Okay.
They have Daniel Pink, not Daniel Pinkman. Yeah. So you said that everybody is a salesperson without even realizing, which is the point he's conveying. And in fact, I leveraged one of his tactics is like asking from 1 to 10 how much the person is inclined to do something.
Yeah.
And then he gives the score. You tell him why didn't you give a lower score?
Yeah.
It's something I used on my cousin that didn't want to eat, and his parents were promising him candies and all of that.
Really?
And I asked him, we are from 1 to 10, how much would you like to eat? And he said to eat that, and he said like 3.
Yeah.
I asked him, why didn't you give it 2?
Yeah.
He said, because I don't want to make mom mad, and I'm also a bit hungry.
Yeah.
And then without realizing, you know, he started eating. So even parents are salespeople, I think.
No, for sure. But that's the classic example. If you can sell your kids going to bed, you can sell anything.
Yeah, it's harder than cybersecurity enterprise
It really
sales.
is, yeah.
Awesome. These books, that podcast, Diary of a CEO, I actually heard the Richard Branson episode. It's incredible. Anything else?
I think that those are the main things I recommend. I mean, obviously listen to other stuff and read other stuff, but those are things that I almost know that people would benefit from.
Awesome. Good. So, Simon, I was super glad to have you. Thank you so much
Thanks for inviting me on, Ben.
For showing today and for shaping my early career in sales. That's been a great episode.
Glad to hear it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.